everyone, welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Nina, and today we're going to be continuing along a series of videos on my channel of me reading quite famous and iconic book series for the first time. This video is one I'm so excited for and honestly have kind of been planning to do since November of last year, and that is we are going to be reading the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel book to the original Hunger Games series and follows the villain of that series, President Snow, back when he was a teenager, and his involvement with the development of the Hunger Games as a spectator sport, as well as showing how he got his ruthless, cutthroat personality that led him to becoming the all-powerful president of Panem that we see him as in the original trilogy. This video will contain spoilers. It's definitely more so intended for people that have either already watched the movie or read the book, but I'll do a couple maybe non-spoiler sections close to the end, so please use the chapters in the description to move around the video as you see fit. Before we begin, I thought again I would talk about my connection to this book series really briefly. As I mentioned in my Hunger Games reading vlog, I was not a huge fan of this series growing up, and by that I mean I just didn't really have a lot of exposure to it. I didn't actively dislike it or anything, it just wasn't a book series I ended up reading when I was younger. And I was definitely like the key age demographic of younger millennials that were perfectly in that like tween-teen age demographic when the series was getting really popular. However, even though I did not have a lot of exposure to it, my wife is a big fan of the series and had read all the original books and had seen all of the movie adaptations right when they had come out. And randomly at the beginning of last year, I asked her if she would want me to watch the movie adaptations of the series. So I ended up watching it and I really enjoyed my time with them. With the Hunger Games, I was enjoying it but wasn't like obsessed with it. But then obviously with Catching Fire, it is probably one of the best book to movie adaptations ever made, as well as just being like one of the best movies ever made. So I completely fell in love with the series after that and knew that I wanted to eventually read the original source material. So I decided to do that with the goal of reading it before the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie came out. And I ended up finishing those books as well as the end of that vlog right after seeing the movie opening weekend. So yes, I did see the movie adaptation of this book before now reading it. However, I have only seen it that one time in theaters, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things I forget that happened while I'm going through and reading it. But I really loved the movie when I saw it, and I'm so excited to jump back into this world and see all these characters again, and hopefully just get a lot more insight and seeing the world from Snow's perspective. So with that intro out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the reading vlog. I think this is going to be divided probably around 3 parts, as all of the Hunger Games books follow a pretty strict 3-act structure. So I'm going to do updates as I finish each part of the book. And with that intro out of the way, let's get into the video. So I've actually read the first section of this book, so I thought I would start off by giving you like a rough summary of what the book is about, and then we can go into some of my thoughts on it. So for the basic plot, this book follows Coriolanus Snow, or the young President Snow from the original trilogy, who at this time is an 18-year-old student at this elite academy in the capital. And for the first time, the students, as kind of like part of a senior project, are going to work as the mentors for the tributes selected for the Hunger Games. This is the 10th Hunger Games, and it's very different from how the Hunger Games are portrayed during Katniss's time in the original trilogy. They basically are just this very stripped down battle royale where all the kids go at each other and it's basically over in a matter of hours. Snow ends up getting paired to be the mentor for the girl from District 12, and at first he's like, ugh, this sucks. District 12 is the smallest and the poorest district. She's probably gonna get killed in the first like hour and I'm not gonna be able to really shine as a student. But the girl that ends up getting selected is Lucy Gray Baird, and she knows how to attract a spotlight. She is like a singer and performer through and through, and once Snow kind of gets to see her potential, they start working together to figure out a way that can benefit both of them come the time of the Hunger Games. This book, like all the other Hunger Games books, is broken up into 3 pretty equally split sections. So the first section is what I've read so far, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, and that covers pretty much everything leading up to the start of the games. One of the first things that struck me was how much this book plays with Snow being on this like sliding scale of likability as the main character, which makes this book be a really good villain origin story. Because one second he'll be like, if I can't do well in the games, I won't be able to go to college, and then I will have to move into like a shitty apartment and get like a normal citizen job, which is something that he's not used to coming from a very prestigious like old money family in the capital. And I'm just like, oh, boo-hoo, you'll have to be a normal citizen, Snow. Let me get out the tiniest violin. But then you learn just like how much Snow and to other extents the other students at the capital like did suffer in the war. Like for Snow in particular, he lost both of his parents, he had to deal with a lot of food scarcity, and saw some really horrific things. And from the opening scene, you can really see like just how much his family is just one step away from really extreme poverty. And unlike all of his classmates, his family did not really like bounce back after the war. And unlike their family motto of Snow lands on top, they are really just like scraping the bottom of the barrel to get by. And then all of this is really contrasted in the character of Sejanus Plinth, who is another one of Snow's classmates. And he kind of represents this like nouveau riche of a person who is from the district but then made it into the capital and has gotten wealthy because of the war. But Sejanus really resents his wealth and has a lot of sympathy for the people from the districts. I feel like when watching the movie, I didn't really see how much Snow both like envies and also resents Sejanus. Snow really comes across as such a bitch in his internal monologue because he like doesn't get why Sejanus is so sad about ending up with the boy from District 2 as the tribute he's going to mentor, because Snow sees that boy as having like one of the best chances of winning the Hunger Games. But since Sejanus grew up in District 2, he actually had this boy as like a former classmate. And it isn't until a little later in the story that Snow imagines that Sejanus probably sees himself as having just like narrowly avoided a fate of being chosen for the reaping. Of course, there is a more empathetic side that Snow doesn't get, which is the fact that Sejanus is just like a nice, good person, and he feels terrible for the sake of the tributes, not for his own narrow escape from District 2. I mentioned this in my Hunger Games reading vlog, but I feel like in the Hunger Games, it literally says it in the title. There is a lot of emphasis on food and food scarcity as a sign of power and control. Snow's poverty really comes through strongest in the fact that his opening scene is him boiling cabbage for breakfast to try and trick his stomach to feeling fuller because his family can't afford anything else for him to eat. And his school lunches are pretty much the only time where he gets to eat and actually feel full. I want to talk now about Lucy Gray because I really, really love her. Her and Snow being such a good couple on stage together is amazing, with both of them having this kind of inherent skill for performing. I do have to regret to say that also they are very cute and a very like shippable couple. I feel like there's a lot of moments of Lucy Gray kind of like poking fun at Snow and needling him and making him get like more blushed and embarrassed. Like she makes a joke that her and Snow should get married and Snow starts blushing at that. Also a little bit of a spoiler I guess for the third section of the book. But there is a part where she says that she wishes that she had met him in a different circumstance. Like maybe he just came in when she was singing at a bar and then they like struck up a conversation afterwards. Which is literally what happens in the third section of the book when Snow goes to District 12. And it really felt like over the course of this section, like the more scenes that they have together, it shows them developing a like more genuine friendship and connection. And they have such good chemistry that you can't help but root for them at least a little bit. Another thing I've seen come up a lot is the portrayal of the people from the districts as animals. At one point early on, Snow admits that he saw Lucy Gray as his filly in the race, and that kind of changes and she becomes more and more human as he gets to know her. Also the fact that at this time the tributes are being held in an empty enclosure in the zoo, with the people of the capital on the outside being able to like look in on them. And with some encouragement, the tributes start performing in the zoo cage to get the capital crowd to throw them food. I feel like in terms of like how the students view the people from the capital and view like their experience in the war and then the subsequent Hunger Games is kind of a mixed bag. A lot of them seem to really hate the Hunger Games and how brutal it is, and they just feel like how it is just like dragging the war out. And I feel like this is kind of showing that they aren't fully brainwashed yet. I feel like this is quite different from the movie adaptation. At least from my reading of it, the movie adaptation makes pretty much all of Snow's classmates very unlikable and incredibly rude and heartless when it comes to the tributes. But in the original book, there's definitely a lot more nuance to how the students think about their tributes. And some of them also kind of go through the same transformation that Snow does of thinking of them as these like animalistic barbarians to just regular kids like the rest of the other students in the capital. So that is my update for the first section of the book. I'm going to listen to more of the audiobook today, and I'll probably come back to you in the next couple days when I have another update. Okay, so I'm currently actually in the middle of the last chapter in part 2, but I thought I would come on now and talk about my feelings for this second section of the book. I have just like a lot of little things that I've noticed that I wanted to mention here. The first one is actually something that's brought up in part 1, and that is about like Snow having the scent of roses aligned with his mother and making him feel safe. And this is pretty interesting because obviously in the Hunger Games, the roses become aligned with him using that scent to hide the fact that he's been poisoning people, as well as himself. So it's kind of interesting to see that progression from something that he had all the way back in his like early childhood. And then the rose-scented compact that was his mother's becomes the thing of his that he gives to Lucy Gray to kind of be like representative of himself when she's in the Hunger Games, kind of showing that he's always by her side. But also the fact that he kind of like indirectly tells her to fill the compact with rat poison and use it as a tool to help her win. The first section of part 2 was really just like me, again, like feeling very giddy with all of the like romance elements between Snow and Lucy Gray. Snow getting like super jealous and possessive over Lucy Gray singing about another boy. And then in their like final meeting before she goes off into the Hunger Games, her kissing him and then Snow getting like so elated from the kiss is just so incredibly cute. Talking on like the other end of the spectrum, I was also like laughing pretty much every time Snow is just so fucking mean to Sejanus's mom. Pretty much every interaction he has with her is him thinking just how like simple and uncivilized she is. Because she's from the district, so he thinks that all of their ways are really backwards compared to how things are done with the Capitol. And he has his own ideas of how like social interactions, particularly between other like upper crust people, are supposed to go. And the people from the districts don't really have that same kind of background or like previous knowledge for how you're supposed to like negotiate social situations. So it comes across as him like constantly like rolling his eyes at everything that Sejanus and his parents do. I do really like that the book has a lot of additional info that we get about Sejanus's background. I feel like it really helps flesh him out as a character. And again, I am a bit shocked that the book really makes it seem like him and Snow didn't really have any prior relationship before this. I definitely didn't get that perspective from the movie. It made it seem like in the movie that Snow and Sejanus actually did like spending time with each other. Whereas in the book, it seems like Snow does have like some emotions towards Sejanus, but he definitely doesn't want to consider him a friend in public. And in a lot of ways, he's just being nice to Sejanus and humoring the things that his family wants because he wants access to Sejanus's wealth. Moving on to a different topic that I know I mentioned before, but a lot of the like reoccurring themes of how the people from the districts are related to animals, or just like the situation of thinking people from the districts as like second-class citizens and then less than human. And then it becomes Snow's goal in like a lot of the interviews to kind of make it seem like Lucy Gray, because she's a member of the Covey and they traveled around to a bunch of different districts, that they're not actually really members of District 12. They easily could have been people that had traveled to the Capitol, and it just happened to be like a bad circumstance that got them stuck in 12. And he's doing this so that the people from the Capitol will relate to her more and see her kind of at a higher level than the other tributes. I think it's also interesting because we see in a couple different interviews with some of the other side characters their opinions about the people from the districts. Like, we kind of out of nowhere get the implication that Dean Highbottom is more on the side of the people from the districts. And also after the death of the other tribute from District 12, his mentor, Lysistrata, who is friends with Snow, she's being interviewed for the news, and she kind of talks about how this tribute, Jessup, was really loyal and kind, and the news anchor is like, oh, kind of like a really loyal dog. And Lysistrata really pushes back against that and is like, no, he was loyal and kind like a human being would be. I feel like we also see in this section more so the beginning transitions of the Hunger Games from this very like solemn, brutal event to being like a fun sport that everyone is talking about, which was kind of the goal of having all the students work as mentors. It kind of was to inject this like fresh creativity to try and innovate the games, which is something that Snow takes a lot of credit for, since during some group discussions he's the one that kind of comes up with the idea that people should be able to bet on which of the tributes is going to end up winning, and through betting they'll be able to send in supplies to make the people of the Capitol more like ingrained in the outcome of the games and therefore care about it a lot more as opposed to just watching passively. I also feel like as I've read more of this book and kind of hearing some of the things that Suzanne Collins has said in why she wanted to write Sunrise on the Reaping, it really comes across that each of the Hunger Games books is kind of trying to tell us a different thing about like overall society. I know, very basic statement, but let me go into a little bit more detail. I feel like in this one, it's really focusing on the Hunger Games as a force of like control, which is something obviously we saw in the original trilogy. But I feel like this one really focuses on like the Capitol's perspective of the Hunger Games, and from some of the things that Dr. Gall has said to Snow, they see the like dictatorship of the Capitol and the Hunger Games as part of this like social contract in order to keep control. And they need this control because from their perspective, without it, society would just like devolve into pure chaos. And this is becoming something more and more ingrained into the people from the Capitol so that they can find everything that happened during the war and afterwards with the Hunger Games completely justified, because then from their perspective, it's the only way that society can be held together, which obviously is untrue, but it kind of helps build out the rationale for why the people from the capital are the way they are. And these thematic elements being brought up in the book helps then the reader kind of see similar analogs in the real world. I think the whole thing just really goes to show just how amazing of a writer Suzanne Collins is, and how she really works super hard in all of her like thematic developments through her books. And I'm really interested in seeing how she's going to expand on these themes in different ways in the next book in the Hunger Games series. Anyway, that is all of my thoughts for the second part of the book. I'm going to continue listening to the audiobook and read it over the course of the next week, and I'll come back to you in a couple days with my final update once I finish the book. Okay, I finished Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and I really enjoyed it. But before we get to like a general review, I want to talk a little bit specifically just about part 3. So fucking much happens in this section that it's kind of hard to talk about in one update, because we basically see like the entirety of Snow's journey as a peacekeeper, and then his like rise and fall in his relationship with Lucy Gray. Things start off being very bleak for Snow, but then it gets better when Snow realizes that Sejanus has joined him in District 12. And just like the way that Snow talks about Lucy Gray and seeing her again when he first gets to 12, he is so down bad. I feel like his like love and like this possibility of a relationship with her kind of bleeds into Snow being more positive and also treating all the people around him a little bit better. It feels like he even is getting more fond of Sejanus in this early section. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of emphasis on control, and that being something that at least Dr. Gall sees as an essential part of the Hunger Games and the Capitol's power. But it's also something that Snow really personally resonates with because of how much he likes being in control. Like there's a part where Snow is kind of like getting scared and grossed out by the idea of the forest and it being something so wild. I feel like it shows just like how sheltered he is, but also his like obsession with order and control. He also really dislikes the Mockingjays. There's a funny part of him thinking that he hated the Mockingjay on sight, and I was like, LOL, really great considering how much he ends up hating a different Mockingjay later on. And I feel like this is him hating them because he sees them as something so wild and unchecked. And the fact that they were a product of the Jabberjay program that the Capitol had, where the Jabberjays ended up mating with the local mockingbirds and producing this new species, and that kind of all being an unintended consequence of the Capitol's plan. That hatred for an unintended consequence is probably why he hates then any victor who in the Hunger Games uses something unintended to get their win, because he sees it as an attack on the Capitol and their ability to control a situation. Moving now to talk about the Covey and Lucy Gray's connection with them. I totally didn't notice in the movie adaptation that Lucy Gray's ex-boyfriend Billy Tope is a like now ousted former member of the Covey. I also didn't notice from the movie adaptation kind of like the naming scheme that all the Covey members have. There's a part where they're all talking about the Covey names and how they're all like a combo of a song with a color. And then them saying that Snow's name sounds like it could be Covey because of the connection with the color Snow White. And Snow feeling really happy and content and really wishing that this was his life, one that's like not connected to power and ambition. And it's just so sad to see that like he could have had all of this happiness with the connection from the naming convention. He already fits so easily into the Covey's dynamic, and he could have really had this happy future with Lucy Gray if he hadn't been so aggressive later on. Lucy Gray says that trust for her is more important than love. And this is very interesting considering that Snow kind of like losing his trust in Lucy Gray is what makes him change. I don't really know how exactly I feel about the very end of this book. It feels like Snow turned on Lucy Gray so fast and like completely cut out that part of himself like so easily and quickly. I really can't get a read on if we are supposed to get the message that Snow, stepped across that line into evil, or if he was kind of always a bad person at heart even before everything that happened in the Hunger Games. At the very least, it was very easy for him to take that step over compared to a character like Sejanus, who never ever wanted to make that choice and hurt people. It felt like Snow was very quick to rationalize every death that he caused as something he either had to do or was something that was like thrust upon him over his own doing. I know another point I've seen from other people's posts and reviews is a discussion on how much Lucy Gray is manipulating Snow. I think maybe this might be a little bit of my like autistic ass not being able to read intention through just text, but I was under the impression that she was being honest with Snow for the majority of the book. I think this comes from the opening scene of her in the zoo cage with him, when she goes up to Snow and kind of like tells him to own the stage with her, kind of signaling to him that he has to follow her lead in acting for the cameras. I feel like this is her allowing Snow to kind of see like her persona and then her true self being something else, and kind of like signaling to him and to us that she does have two different modes, But the question is then, how much is she still acting when she's around Snow otherwise and not in front of the cameras? Those are all my thoughts for the third section. Talking about the book now overall, I really did enjoy my experience reading this. I think Suzanne Collins is an amazing writer and weaves in so many different themes really well. I was a little bit unsure about what I was going to give my final rating for this book, but I think I am going to give it 5 stars because I feel like there isn't a lot of things I would change or really felt like I was left wanting more from. I feel like the ambiguous ending really does help benefit the book in the long run, with leaving you a lot of different questions to discuss. And even though Coriolanus Snow is a little bit of an annoying character in some parts, I feel like it all helps build to the overarching storyline, and this being a villain origin story for him, I feel like he is really well developed. I thought now to kind of leave off the end of this video, I would talk now about some predictions that I have for Sunrise on the Reaping, because as I started this vlog, it was announced that Suzanne Collins was going to come out with a 5th book in Hunger Games series, which is going to focus on the second quarter quell, or the 50th Hunger Games, which is also the Hunger Games where Haymitch Abernathy won. We have seen the exact circumstances for how Haymitch won his Hunger Games during a part of Catching Fire, when Katniss and Peeta are watching recordings from old Hunger Games. I'm going to read now a quote that Suzanne Collins did in her statement for why she ended up writing this book. With Sunrise on the Reaping, I was inspired by David Hume's idea of implicit submission, and in his words, the easiness in which the many are governed by the few. The story also lends itself into a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. The question, real or not real, seems more pressing to me every day. First of all, I really love this more intellectual angle that Suzanne Collins goes into when it comes to writing her books, and how she is using the world of the Hunger Games to talk about different facets of the real world that we live in. And that she is going into this book with a clear goal and agenda in mind, with the themes that she wants to discuss through the course of the story. These predictions are ones I kind of developed on my own, as well as things I saw discussed in this video, as well as the comment section in this video. A big point of contention is if this book is actually going to focus on Haymitch, since I don't think he was actually mentioned by name at all in any of the summaries that have come out for the book so far. A lot of people just know, since this is the Hunger Games in which Haymitch wins, that he is going to be a character in this book, but we're actually not sure if he's going to be the main POV character. A lot of people are thinking that this book is going to be multiple POV, which isn't something that Suzanne Collins usually writes, but I feel like it makes a lot of sense for this book since it is one that's going to talk about the ideas of perspective and objectivity in establishing the truth. In his Hunger Games, Haymitch partnered with another female tribute from District 12, who I believe's name is Maylee, but I might not be remembering that correctly. And she's the twin sister of this character Madge's mother, who is one of Katniss's friends, and in the book version is the person that gives Katniss the Mockingjay pin. The character of Madge and her family is kind of written out in the movie universe and doesn't really play that prevalent of a role in the movie versions. But at least in the book, it seems like her and her family have some connection to Katniss, Haymitch, and the overarching rebellion. I think it makes a lot of sense for the character of Madge's mom, who is unnamed, to be a POV character. For me, this comes from the fact that we've never seen a book that focuses on the people in the districts watching the games. Obviously, from Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we see the perspective of the people in the capital watching the games. But I feel like this is a good way to show the tragedy of the districts in this character watching her own twin sister die, and also then her connection with Haymitch afterwards as being one of maybe the only people that can really understand his pain. Another theory that came from this comment I thought was so incredibly good, and this is the idea that the book will be from the perspective of a career tribute, stemming from the idea that the title is Sunrise on the Reaping, and the Reapings go from order of districts, starting from 1 to 12, and District 1 would have their reaping close to sunrise. It also makes sense because the female tribute from District 1 is the final tribute that Haymitch faces off against in the final confrontation, which results in him winning the Hunger Games. I think this would be really interesting if this is a direction that Suzanne Collins goes for the book, because the careers and the career tributes that spring up over the series make a really interesting case study for a lot of different themes. They can be portrayed as an antagonistic force, but it often comes back to, especially in their final moments, just like another tragedy and a victim of the capital's cruelty. I think with the theme of propaganda and how the ease of the many are controlled by the few, I feel like having a career tribute as a POV character really fits well for these themes, and it would be a great place to talk about how the careers are kind of brainwashed into their cause and volunteering to participate in the Hunger Games. There even could be a moment where the female tribute is not able to volunteer fast enough, and her then feeling sad, and then having the reveal of the second quarter quell being that there's going to be double at the many of tributes participating. So then she is able to go and serve in this year's Hunger Games like she wanted. And this can all be contrasted to the tragedy of the special rule in a place like District 12. Overall, I'm so excited for this book to come out. I think any direction that Suzanne Collins goes in will probably go well, considering her track record with the other Hunger Games books. And I'm just so excited for this book to come out and for the future movie adaptation for this book as well. Anyway, with that section done, we are at the end of this video. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching. If you got this far into the video, put like the little dove emoji in the comments. I feel like whenever I'm talking about Lucy Gray, I often use that emoji in conjunction with her. It just feels like an appropriate emoji to use for this series. If you guys enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time, as well as following me on my Bookstagram, which is linked in the description. And that is going to be it from me today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!